It settles slowly, like a hand smoothing a bedsheet. Pines draw dark lines against the deep blue sky. The air cools. The day exhales. Crickets begin their tiny chorus, steady and kind. If you listen, the forest sounds like a big old house, creaking softly while everyone inside drifts toward sleep. You are here at the edge of Gravity Falls, where roads turn into paths and paths turn into moss. A little clearing waits beside a slow creek. Someone has left a neat circle of stones. There are old logs to sit on, smooth and sun-bleached. A small fire kindles with a single match. It is not a loud fire. It makes a low sound and a steady glow, like a nightlight that knows stories. Above you, the sky does its quiet work. Constellations climb like ladders. In Gravity Falls, the stars feel closer, as if the town sits at the bottom of a gentle bowl, and the rim is the Milky Way. Some folks call this hour the second twilight. Not quite night, not quite day. A place between, perfect for stories that are also between. True and not true. Dream and memory. A little of both. You feel safe here. That matters. We will travel, but we will not rush. We will wonder, but we will not worry. The forest keeps to itself. The river keeps its rhythm. The town has locked its doors, but its windows are warm with light. If you close your eyes, you can almost hear each porch step settle, each floorboard release a long hush. Tonight we will walk gently across the grain of Gravity Falls and let the stories come to us. No chases, no sharp edges, just the soft turning of pages inside the dark. In the distance, the old clock tower is a shape against the sky. The diner sign hums as it cools. From the lake you can smell water like glass. Somewhere a radio is still on, but quiet, playing a tune that sounds like it came out of a dusty shoebox. You know this place. Even if you do not know it yet, you do. It knows you too. The first spark from the fire floats up, a bright dot passing through shadow, then fades. You watch it go. Another rises. It drifts and goes out. A small ritual, a small good night. Stories rise like that too. They lift from people and places and then dissolve back into them. That is fine. We are not catching them. We are only watching. So we begin with water. Water remembers and water forgets. In this valley, it once did something very odd. The old folks call it the year the river turned its mind around. They smile when they say it. They say it changed the town a little. They say it woke up a few sleeping truths and put a few proud lies to bed. We will follow the river into that story now. Slow steps, bare feet on cool ground. The night holds the lantern. You hold a handle. There is time. There is always time. The river in Gravity Falls usually moves like a patient dog. It has places to go, yes, but it prefers to saunter. It bends around stones with a small nod. It combs the roots of trees as if checking on them. It knows the salmon and the reeds and the flat gray rocks where kids skip stones and count the rings of each ripple. One spring, after a week of rain that sounded like a million soft hands clapping, the river changed its mind. No one saw the exact moment. In the morning, it still moved toward the lake. In the afternoon, it paused, very politely, as if waiting at a door. By dusk, it was moving the other way, back toward the hills, reverse and sure, as calm as a rope being pulled hand over hand. People came to the bank with umbrellas and wool hats. No one shouted, they watched. Old Mrs. Voss put her thermos down and said it looked like the mountain was breathing and the river was the chest. In and out, not trouble. A sigh the size of a valley. It made sense in the way some things in Gravity Falls make sense only when you do not push them too hard. For a week, the backward flow continued. The docks adjusted. A boy's little boat tied with 2 knots swung to face the other way. Leaves that had been on their way to the lake changed their minds and visited the underbridge routes one more time. The fish did not panic. They turned and drifted upstream, unbothered, tails moving just enough to steer. If you stood on the bank with your eyes half closed, you could see the whole river as one creature, simply rolling over for a different nap. There were stories that grew around it. In a town like this, stories grow like ferns in wet shade. One said the river had swallowed a wish the wrong way many years ago, and now it was returning the wish to its sender. Another said the river had found a loop in time, a soft pocket, and was exploring it the way a cat explores a cardboard box. Someone swore they saw written words moving in the current, but the words were too slow to catch and too gentle to frighten. At night, the river made a new sound. It was still water, but it held a small hush, a backward hush. Stand very still, and you could imagine it saying sorry to the roots it had missed. Hello again to the stones it had only brushed once before. See you later to the lake that could wait. The moon liked this new sound. You could tell because the light on the surface made a long, pale arrow, pointing upstream as if the sky agreed to the change. Dipper, being a person with questions that never truly slept, came down with a flashlight and a notebook. He wrote down water levels and times, measured the angle of the current with a twig and a leaf, but after a while he put the notebook away. He stood with his hands in his pockets and let the river speak in the language of slow. He felt the part of himself that wanted answers relax and sit down beside the part that wanted only to listen. He would write later. Now he would be a rock. Rocks learn what rivers say. Mabel, because she is made of color and warmth, wove a little garland from wildflowers and set it on the water. The garland took a moment to decide. Then it turned about, bowed to the children on the bank, and glided upstream, bright and silly against the dusk. Mabel clapped once, very quietly, the kind of clap you make for a baby deer that just stood up. Soos, arriving with a paper bag of warm biscuits and a grin that always fits, said the river was doing a fun trick for morale. He said sometimes he also walked backward in front of the TV just to keep life spicy. He passed out biscuits, and steam puffed into the cool air like tiny new clouds. The grown-ups remembered other years. Memory in Gravity Falls is part ink and part smoke. They told the story of a different spring when the river rose and kissed the bottom steps of the diner. They told the story of a summer when it got so low you could cross on stones without getting your shoes wet. They told the old story of the founding, when a group of tired people followed the river because it looked trustworthy. It still did. Even upside down, it was gentle. On the fifth night, a fog came in, low and kind. It slid across the surface and made the world smaller in a good way. Branches were silhouettes. The fire on the shore was a red pearl in cotton. If you sat on the dock with your feet over the water, you felt the current tug your toes from the lake toward the hills. If you leaned back, the fog put a cool hand on your forehead, the way a grandmother checks for fever. No fever. Only the opposite of hurry. In that fog, a few people saw something the same and different. It was an old canoe, green paint scratched and honest, drifting upstream without a paddle, without a rider, steady as thought. In the bow sat a glass jar with a lid tied on with twine. The jar held a folded paper and a dry sprig of cedar. The canoe passed under the bridge and kept going. The watchers said nothing. They did not call out. They let the canoe pass as if it were a shy animal. Later, someone said the paper was a wish letter returning to the forest. Later, someone said it was a map for the trees. In Gravity Falls, both could be true. After 7 days, the river took a breath and turned itself around again. There was no speech. It did not bow. It simply slowed, paused, and then continued toward the lake, as if a dream had ended and morning had arrived. People nodded to each other like neighbors on a porch. Dipper lifted his pencil. Mabel waved at the water as if it were a bus leaving for town. Soos cheered once and said the river had just completed a sick moonwalk. The mountains held still, pleased in private. Did the town change? Not in ways you could point at. The diner still opened at the same hour. The clock still counted in its careful way. But for a while, people walked home against the normal flow of sidewalks, just to feel what the river felt. A few sat facing the back of the room at the movie theater and watched the story reflected on the booth's chrome. Children brushed their teeth with their left hands to see if the bubbles tasted different. We learned from rivers. We learned to visit our habits from the other side just for a week, just to find a kinder path back. When sleep took the town that night, it came from toes to crown, upstream through the body, gentle and slow. If you dreamed, the dream carried you back toward whatever you once loved, and then set you down beside it. You could sit there a while. You could listen to it breathe. Then you could turn and float forward again. That is what the river taught. No lesson was announced. It was all water and hush. It was enough. On certain evenings, the lake becomes a sky. The town calls it lantern night. No one votes on the date. The air decides. The trees decide. The lake decides. You know it is time because the wind comes smooth from the west and smells faintly of sap and apples, and the shore sand holds the day's warmth like a secret. People arrive slowly, in loose clusters, talking in the low voices we keep for tender things. Some bring small wooden lantern boats they made long ago and mend each year. Some bring paper lanterns folded from old maps. Some bring only candles, and the lake lends them its hands. Children help. They learn that wax strips can be friendly if you let them cool on your finger. They learn to cup a flame and walk without hurry. Every year, someone drops a match. Every year, someone catches a laugh before it becomes loud. A lantern is a simple thing. A base that floats. A side that shields. A light that says please and thank you. On lantern night, people write on the sides. Not big wishes, not demands. Small sentences that fit inside a whisper. Thank you for June. Please watch over Aunt May. I am trying to be braver. See you soon. It is not about sending messages away. It is about giving them a place to glow. When the sun slides down behind the ridge and the trees turn into paper cutouts, the first lantern enters the water. It is never clear who starts. The lake makes a path, the way a friend makes space on a couch. The light moves out a little, turns once as if to look back, then steadies. More lights join. They bump and adjust and then keep distance kindly, like neighbors who know when to speak and when to rest. From the far shore, the lanterns look like a new constellation, rising in a slow loop from the land. From the dock, they are a garden of tiny moons, each with its own weather. From your hands, they are warm little thoughts that do not need to be solved. This is important. Not every thought asks for an answer. Some ask only to be set gently in water and watched. You hear Soos explaining to a group of kids how to choose a good launching. He uses words like glide zone and splash factor. But his voice is a lullaby, and his hands are careful. Wendy ties a strand of red thread around a lantern base and says it is for luck. She says luck is just attention with a grin. Dipper pretends not to believe in any of this, then writes 3 notes, folds them into triangles, and tucks them under a candle. Mabel draws a sweater on the side of hers, bright and silly, and writes a single word inside the sweater collar: home. The lake has its own guests. If you sit on these slats of the dock with your feet pulled up, you can see them. Not dramatic, just soft noses and soft ripples, a glimmer of scales, an eye like a drop of tea. The creatures under Gravity Falls Lake are curious but polite. They trail the lanterns at a distance, keeping pace the way you walk near someone in a museum. A turtle carries one tiny lantern on its shell, nudging it along like a waiter who enjoys his work. No one taught them. This is just what they do on this night. Sometimes music finds a shore. It is never loud. A harmonica that has seen many jacket pockets. A guitar with strings that remember campfire smoke. The notes lift and settle on the water and sit beside each flame like a tired bird. Voices do not sing. Humming is the language here. Humming and the knock of wood against wood as lanterns pass each other and then separate again. If you look up, the sky gives an answer. Stars gather in places you did not notice last week. The Big Dipper leans a little, like it is listening to its small cousin on the lake. The moon, if it is present, keeps a straight face and pretends it had nothing to do with any of this, though it clearly did. On a few rare years, what the old-timers call second twilight lingers longer, and the horizon holds on to blue while the lanterns bloom below. Two twilights at once, a gentle overlap, like two hands folding. What are the rules of lantern night? There are not many. Move slowly. Keep the lights safe. Speak softly. Share matches. If someone cries, look at the water, not at their face, to give them privacy beside company. If a lantern tips, do not rush in. The lake will decide. The lake is good at deciding. Often another lantern will drift close and right the one that leaned. People do that for each other, too, when they are patient. As the night deepens, the lanterns drift toward the center and form a loose spiral. No one charts it. It happens the way vines find a fence. A long dream circle. A turning that is not an ending. Some lanterns go dark and still float. Pale paper on black glass. That is not a failure. That is the candle resting the way breath rests between in and out. A few lights hold on past midnight. They become the last word and the first yawn. When it is time to gather the lanterns back, the lake makes a thin breeze that pushes the spiral towards shore. People wade in knee-deep. Jeans roll, teeth flashing when they laugh by mistake. The candles are pinched. Notes are slid into pockets or left to soften and blur. This is how memories behave too. Sharp at first, kind later. The creatures below turn away without fuss. The turtle nods and goes about its night. Walking home, the town is so quiet you can hear the hum of the diner's soda machine through the door. Porch lights click off one by one. Someone yawns on a top step and says goodnight to no one, and everyone. You look back once at the lake. It is plain water again, dark and satisfied. It is both sky and mirror. It keeps both jobs well. When you sleep, you might dream of small moving lights that do not need to arrive anywhere to be complete. You might dream of your own thoughts floating, forming a circle and returning. You do not need to hold them all at once. You can meet each one when it drifts to you. You can set it down gently. You can rest while it glows. The clock tower in Gravity Falls is not the tallest thing in town, but it stands like an older cousin who has seen a few weddings and a few blizzards and a few jokes told badly. Its face is round and kind. Its hands are long and a little tired. At noon and midnight, it rings a bell that many residents no longer hear, because the body learns to fold familiar sounds into its own heartbeat. Once the clock forgot time. It did not break. It did not fight. It simply forgot. This is not as strange as it sounds. People forget what day it is all the time. A clock is a kind of person when it has watched as many birthdays as this one has. The forgetting happened on a Tuesday that began like a practice run for Wednesday. Crows on the roof line, a donut box at the counter, the town warming up to itself. At 11:58, the minute hand hesitated. At 11:59, it lifted its chin, as if listening to a distant whistle. Then it stayed where it was. The second hand continued its circle for a while, puzzled but loyal, then decided to join. Noon did not arrive. 12 o'clock waited politely in the hall. The bell held its breath and kept holding it. No one panicked. A few people looked up at the tower the way you look at a friend who has paused in the middle of a sentence. You do not demand. You give them a beat, maybe 2, maybe 10. The diner kept pouring coffee. The post office kept sorting circulars. The library's door clicked shut, and the books inside sighed in their paper way. Time in Gravity Falls is sometimes a blanket you can tuck tighter or loosen a notch. That day, the blanket loosened. The strangest part was not the silence. It was the way everyone took a longer step into patience. Lines moved slower and felt shorter. Lids came off jars without a struggle. The teachers stopped mid-lesson and let the class do a puzzle they were saving for Friday. A mechanic found a bolt under a radiator he had been missing for 2 weeks and lifted it like a found coin. If you asked what time it was, people checked the sun, then shrugged and smiled. If you can see where the light is, you can guess where you are. Kids loved it. A whole town in the twilight between moments. They played chalk games across the sidewalks without worrying a bell would call them home. They learned the taste of unmeasured minutes. It was sweet, and a little like mint tea cooled to the perfect sip. They did not drink it fast. You cannot drink a day like that fast. Dipper tested theories without pushing them. He counted his own pulse and noted nothing out of the ordinary. He wound a pocket watch and watched it stop in sympathy with the tower after 10 sure ticks. He sighed and sat on the curb and let his mind climb a ladder to a comfortable thought. Some mysteries work you like clay only if you squeeze back. If you rest your hands, they rest too. Mabel knit. She knit with a sky-blue yarn that matched the big bowl of afternoon above the town. She did not finish a sweater. She did not start one either. She knit as if the air needed a pattern to follow. Loops of gentle blue holding nothing, holding everything. Now and then she looked up at the tower and nodded, as if to say, "Good choice, friend." The clock, if it looked back, would have nodded too. It was that kind of day. Around what would have been evening, something soft and new happened. The clock rang 13. Not clang, not warning. A bell that sounded like rain on a porch roof when you're under a blanket with a book and someone you love is making soup. 13 clear round notes, each one drifting down Main Street and slipping into open windows. People did not count out loud. They did not cheer. They listened with the same respect you give a story you have heard many times and still want to hear again. Why 13? In Gravity Falls, there are answers and there are smiles. The smiles fit better. Some said the clock was letting the town borrow a spare hour it kept tucked behind its gears for difficult winters. Some said it was a gift for the river, a little time to spend how it liked after its backward week. Some said the bell had always wanted to try 13 and simply waited until a day with soft edges to do it. After the 13th note faded, the minute hand remembered itself. It moved. The second hand resumed its patient stroll. The tower sighed in a way only old wood and old metal can. Noon arrived all at once and also not at all. Soon the shadow of the flagpole had slid the width of a lunch plate. Soon porch lights blinked. Soon the diner's neon hummed back into its evening color. People went on doing what people do, but the day had been stretched into a long vowel. It felt good in the mouth. That night, if you walked by the clock on your way home, you could hear a tiny mechanical murmur high above, gear teeth meeting gear teeth like old neighbors saying, "See you tomorrow." You could put your palm on the bricks and feel a hum like a cat asleep on your lap. The town slept well. Time slept too, a hand on the clock's face, the other under the pillow. In dreams, numbers lined up and then wandered and then came back. They were not strict. They were friendly. In the morning, the bell rang 12 at 12. Birds sang on the beat. Coffee was poured in familiar cups. The mechanic tightened the bolt and patted the fender like a shoulder. The teacher finished yesterday's lesson and drew a sun with a smile in the corner of the board. Everyone had more patience than they remembered having. That is what a forgotten hour can do. It returns as gentleness in your hands. Years later, people still tell the story. They do not tell it loudly. They tell it the way you touch a sleeve. They say the clock forgot and the town remembered. They say sometimes you can step outside of hurry and the world does not break. It hushes. It listens. It waits for you to come back, kinder. If you pass the tower at night, look up. The face will be pale and honest. The hands will be where they should be. But now and then, if the wind pauses, you might hear a faint 13th ring that belongs to no hour and every hour. If you do, you can smile and go on. Time gave you a gift once. It probably will again. By day, the Gravity Falls Library keeps a straight back and a sensible voice. By night, it exhales, loosening the knot in its tie, and lets the shelves lean a breath closer to one another. The building remembers the hands that built it. Sawdust trapped in old paint. A carpenter's pencil mark under the stairs, a pressed fern between two floorboards that no one ever swept because it looked like a bookmark left by the forest itself. When the doors are locked and the lamps are low, the air warms was a degree, and the card catalog shifts like a drowsy cat. You can hear it if you choose stillness. It is not speech exactly. It's the paper sigh of 1,000 pages settling after a long day of being turned. It's string bindings easing their shoulders. It's glue that has held for decades saying softly, "Still here." The clock near the returns desk ticks in the polite way of someone who doesn't want to interrupt. And the globe by the reading chair spins a single inch, as if remembering a story about a place that needs only a fingertip to exist. The librarian leaves one green-shaded lamp lit by habit. It makes an island of honey light on the front table. Under it, a pile of notebooks waits for tomorrow's school reports. On the top one, a pencil lays diagonally, the way a compass lays between directions when it loves them all. If you sit in the chair and look down the main aisle, the spines form colored rivers that meet, cross, and separate again. History flows beside botany, botany beside folklore, folklore beside a book whose title has faded to a soft blank, and somehow that blank feels as full as any word. In this library, unhurried hands learn things that rushed eyes miss. Margins hold tiny discoveries in pencil, a leaf sketched with care, an underline under a sentence that felt true at the time, an arrow toward a paragraph that once made someone feel less alone. The penciled notes never shout. They are the quiet footprints of other nights, other readers that tell you, you are not the first person to come here with a full head and leave with a light heart. Sometimes, not often, a book chooses you. It does not fall. It does not glow. It simply leans a breath forward when you pass, the way a friend leans when they have something gentle to share. Dipper once felt that nudge and found a field guide with a pressed clover sleeping on page 12. He did not write anything in it. He only held the clover a moment longer than needed, then tucked it back. the way you tuck a child's blanket before leaving the room. Mabel likes the stories with maps in the front and recipes in the back and drawings in the middle. She stacks them like layers of a cake, a fairy map, a summer pie, a soft pencil dragon with looped eyelashes. She reads sitting cross-legged on the rug that looks like a page sewn from sunlight and dust. At closing time, her sweater catches a few crumbs from the day and brings them home like souvenirs. If you listen deeper, past the paper and the wood, there is a humming that never stops. The librarian says it's the air system. The shelves disagree. They say it's the voices of all the sentences braided together into one safe chorus that holds the weight of your questions without letting them fall. On nights when the rain drums the windows and the trees bend into their own umbrellas, the chorus hums louder, not to be heard, but to be felt, like a hand on your shoulder reminding you that wondering is not the same as worrying. A story is a lamp that never asks you to hurry. This place is full of lamps. You may open one for 5 minutes or 5 hours, and the flame will be the right size for your night. When you put it back, the shelf makes room in that secret way shelves do, and the spine slides into its neighbors like a sigh. You leave softly, the door latch gentler than your heartbeat. The lamp on the front table stays lit, just enough for the books to see each other while they whisper. Sleep comes easily after the library because your mind has been held, not pushed. In dreams, you may find yourself walking between endless shelves that never end because they do not need to. A ladder with wheels glides beside you at the speed of breath. Somewhere a green lamp is always waiting, and when you sit beneath it, the book that opens will be exactly the right one, even if it has no words at all. Behind the diner, where the grease smells like Sundays and the trash cans wear their silver hats tilted just so, there's a slab of brick with a hairline crack in the shape of a smile. In daylight, it is nothing, just wall and shadow, wind and the faint applause of a loose sign chain. At night, some nights, and the smile becomes a seam, and the seam becomes a door, and the door opens to a place the town calls the today door, even though it is not about hours. No one looks for it. People find it when the night has the right temperature of quiet. A cook stepping out to cool his cheeks. A teenager fetching sugar packets someone forgot. A little kid following a cat that knows shortcuts. The door is shy. It likes people who are carrying only what they can set down. If you arrive with arms full of hurry, it closes like a blink and is only brick again. From the alley, you can see the diner windows glowing. Inside, the jukebox hums an old chorus to itself. The neon coffee cup blinks at a slower pulse after midnight, as if sipping a last cup before bed. The door opens, not with a creak, but with a soft change in air, like the moment between breath out and breath in. On the other side is always a beginning, not a beginning you can pin to a calendar, more like the feeling inside the first page of a fresh notebook. Some nights it shows the town's first morning, when the valley was still a bowl of fog and the new plank street told the sunrise where to lay down. The air is pine-sweet and damp, and boots make friendly thuds. Somewhere a rooster has forgotten what volume is. Someone writes a sign in uneven letters and smiles at their own attempt. It is not history you can take. It's history you can sit inside the way you sit inside a song. Other nights, the door opens to an ordinary day you've lived before, polished by memory. The time you dropped your spoon and caught it with a little gasp. The walk home when the street smelled like lilacs and gasoline. The afternoon you learned how to fold a paper boat that did not sink on the first try. You know it's the same day because you feel a small, familiar joy shine through your ribs in the same place it shone then. You also know it's kinder now because you are only visiting. There are rules the door never says out loud. Take nothing you didn't bring. Leave nothing but calm. Do not point and name. Look and notice. If you see someone you love, love them with your eyes. If you see yourself, smile as if at a neighbor. If a cat walks past, it will walk past twice. That is how cats move between beginnings. Dipper once stepped through and found the diner at dawn, empty except for a single coffee waiting near the window with steam making the glass into a ghost lake. He sat. He did not drink. He cupped the cup and watched the little rivers of steam wander into the morning like ideas that don't demand to be written. He left when the steam thinned and the cup was still full, but his hands remembered warmth for hours. Mabel found the door one evening when the sky wore cherry frosting and the alley smelled like cinnamon. On the other side was a street she had never walked, but had always wished for. Porches with socked feet on rails, a mailbox painted like a watermelon, chalk drawings on the curb that looked like hopscotch maps to small kingdoms. She added one square to a chalk game, a little heart in the corner, then stepped back and watched it belong there, as if it had waited for her. Soos discovered the door while taking out cardboard. His box slid from his arms, and the flaps made small applause as they hit the ground. The seams smiled wider. Inside was his own first day at the diner. The bell on the door he held open, then rang out with bird energy. He saw himself younger, with a haircut that believed in itself, being shown the grill by a man in a hat that had heard too many jokes. Soos didn't interrupt. He just stood in the doorway and gave that earlier him 2 thumbs up, which is a way of telling your past. You did fine. The door closes the way a yawn closes, without drama, with gratitude. If you are still inside when it begins to fade, you find yourself gently in the alley again with a small cushion where your hurry used to be. The brick is only brick. The seam is a crack again that looks like a smile because it remembers being one. People who have met the Today door do not brag. They become better at beginnings in small ways. They tie their shoes slower. They take the first bite softer. They step into rooms like they have time to meet every corner. And if they pass the alley at the right hour, they nod to the brick and sometimes leave a sugar packet on the windowsill for whatever night needs it next. The gnomes of Gravity Falls are not scary in moonlight. Shapes that might surprise you at noon become little jokes after dark. Beards like dandelion clocks that forgot to blow away. Hats as red as a stop sign teaching a rose how to be brave. Boots that squeak like rubber ducks, even when they try to be sneaky. They live in networks of root hollows and stump rooms. And once a season, when the dew comes heavy and cherries paint the night, with a fragrance like summer holding its breath, they throw a feast. It begins with a thimble bell rung under a fern. One gnome taps it with a toothpick sword, and the sound is so small you feel it more than hear it. From trunks and tunnels, from knotholes and moss curtains, they arrive carrying plates made of broad leaves, stitched with spider silk, napkins cut from mushroom skins, and spoons carved from acorn caps by someone with a patient pocket knife. The tables are arranged on a fallen log still perfumed with sap, and a tablecloth of lily pads is straightened by 20 small hands, each convinced their corner is the most important. The menu is berry forward. Blueberries like tiny planets that stain mustaches into comets. Strawberries halved into hearts and fanned like cards. Raspberries whose hollows are filled with honey, so glossy you see the stars twice. There are crusts baked in walnut shells that crumble exactly when you bite with kindness. Someone brought a pie in a teacup thieved long ago from a picnic. The cup is cracked and loved and sits on a ring of clover like a fancy mare. There is soup of nettles that tastes like rain on clean stone. There is a punch so fizzy it lifts crumbs into the air and makes the smallest burp sound you ever heard. Mabel once sat at the edge of their clearing, invited by an elder whose beard contained 3 breadcrumbs from last year's feast. He kept them on purpose for luck. She came with a jar of sprinkles because color is her first language. Gnomes had never seen so many small stars in a glass. She shook a constellation over the pie, and the pie, as if blushing, grew sweeter in gratitude. A little gnome asked how to knit sparkles into socks. Mabel promised to try. Dipper approached like visiting a friend's delicate aquarium, curious, careful, well-meaning. He drew a map of the layout in his notebook. Log table here, lantern here, basil bush with 2 snails behind it. He labeled things with arrows that had shy arrowheads, nothing bossy. When he looked up, a line of gnomes had formed to see themselves in his drawing. One pointed at a scribble and said proudly, "That is me." Soos arrived with a folding table too tall by 4 feet. He sawed the legs short with a smile, put the table at the end of the log, and declared it the kids' table, which made every gnome run to it at once because every table is better when it is called that. He fashioned tiny name placards from popsicle sticks, and the gnomes took names like Sir Crumbs, Lady Blue a Berry, and Just Greg, who winked as if being just anything was the bravest choice. Feasting begins with a toast in acorn cups. The elder gnome clears his throat and says words that sound like dry leaves learning to clap. You understand them anyway. Thank you for our tiny busy days, for the shade of big friends, for sugars that do not need counting, for the hat that did not blow away. They clink. The hats wobble. Someone's beer dips briefly into punch and comes out sugared, which is accident and dessert at once. They do not eat quickly. They are talkers, though their words are more hands than voices, pointing, patting, demonstrating with crumbs. 2 gnomes debate the best way to slice strawberry hearts. From leaf to point, says one. From side to side, says the other. Then decide both are right, and trade halves to prove it. A tiny band strikes up a tune on mouth harps and bottle-cap drums. The rhythm is bouncy without getting your heart ahead of you. Fireflies drift low and slow, generous with their lanterns. There are rules, but only good ones. If a crumb falls, celebrate it and share. If your hat tips, bow to whoever saw and laugh once. If a raccoon watches from the fence with paws politely folded, pass him a crust on a leaf. Raccoons, when treated as gentlemen, remember to be gentlemen. If an owl blinks from the sycamore, thank her for keeping an eye on the dark while you keep an eye on the light. If someone grows quiet, let the quiet sit beside you like a friend and do not try to wake it. At the end, there is a custom the gnomes never miss. They stand, wipe their mouths with little mushroom skin napkins, and line up by height, a game that changes nothing and delights everyone. Then each one pockets a single blueberry for tomorrow's first sweetness. They swear it makes the morning kinder. Watching them, you believe it. When the clearing empties, the table looks like a party still happening in a softer world. Seed glitter, sticky circles where cups were, sugar constellations on leaves, a spoon forgotten and shining like a new moon. Mabel collects her jar, now half a sky, and leaves a paper star in its place. Dipper folds his map into a square that feels like a promise and puts it near his heart. Soos wipes the folding table with such care you'd think it belonged to the town, which, for a while, it did. If you sleep within earshot of their laughter fading into roots, you dream tiny good dreams. Flocks of hats bobbing through clover, pies walking themselves to the sink to be washed, a raccoon tipping an invisible cap. You wake with a blueberry taste, even if you ate none, and the day smiles from the edge of your plate. Wendy tells a story the way woods tell it. Leaning on one leg, hands in pockets, eyes half smiling at something only trees can see. She grew up with wind for a neighbor. It taught her the language that lives in the tops of pines where branches trade secrets and never brag. On nights when the town hum drops to a murmur and the sky becomes one long lap of velvet, she speaks low and the forest listens back. The wind here isn't pushy, she says, sitting on a fallen trunk that has been a bench for 100 quiet conversations. It's patient. If you're stubborn, it doesn't argue. It walks beside you until you realize where you're going, and then points with a chin and says, "That way." She flicks a pine needle off her knee, and it rides a breeze like a note on a string. She learned its roots as a kid the way other kids learn alleys. The cut between the red maples that saves you 5 minutes, the corridor behind the mill that smells like flour and rain, the vaulted hall where firs make the air cool even in July. There's a notch in the ridge where gusts comb through like fingers through hair. There's a hollow where the wind goes to catch its breath, and if you sit there, you catch yours too without trying. In winter, the wind tells longer stories. It sings along the aluminum lids on the woodpile, a tune that says blankets in 12 different dialects. It bends into the eaves and plays the house like a harmonica. If you put your palm on the window, you can feel it read your lines and add a few of its own, not to change you, just to let you know it sees you. Wendy has fallen asleep to that music more nights than she can count. Boots by the door, hat over her eyes, the kind of nap where you wake with all your bones on the same page. Her dad taught her the practical verses. Which way to turn your shoulders on a ridge so gusts go around you. How to listen for rain hiding in the next valley. When the breeze is just excited and when it's thoughtful about a storm. He'd squint up at the clouds like they'd each told him a joke and say, "Give it an hour." And it would be exactly an hour. She learned to be tall without towering, sure without sharpness, the way a tree is sure, roots first, then everything else. Sometimes the wind remembers names. It says Wendy by lifting the hair at the back of her neck when she thinks too loud. It says easy by smoothing the top of the grass when someone runs in circles with a worry in their hands. It says here by tugging once at a sleeve when a path forks, and one way goes toward brambles that look like answers, and one way goes toward sunlight that looks like questions. The wind is honest. It loves the questions more. She told Dipper once, "Don't fight for the last word with the wind. It always has a chorus waiting." He laughed and didn't argue because sometimes not arguing is the bravest thing, and also because a gust took his hat and set it down 2 feet away as if to say, "See, we can both be right." He wrote in his notebook, "Learn to be a weather vane when I can't be a compass." Mabel treats the wind like a friend who needs accessories. She ties a ribbon to a branch and watches it point and dance. When it frays, she braids the threads and wears them on her wrist until they become season-colored and fall away by themselves, which is the ribbon's way of saying thank you and goodbye at once. Wendy's favorite path is one most visitors miss, a seam between salal and sword fern where the air always smells like the first sip of water when you're thirsty. Walk it at dusk and the wind will test your balance gently, like a partner learning your steps. It pushes a little, then eases, just enough to make you pick your feet up instead of shuffle. At the end, there's a view that feels like taking off a heavy backpack you didn't know you were wearing. The town is a handful of warm squares. The lake is a coin catching a lucky light. The ridge is a sleeping animal too big to worry about anything smaller than mountains. People think the wind is wild, Wendy says. Most days it's polite. It knocks. If you don't answer, it leaves you a note written in leaves. She stands, stretches, and the tree she leaned on seems to straighten with her. The breeze lifts, turns the page, and the forest skims ahead to the chapter where everyone goes home with twigs in their hair and doesn't mind. That night you fall asleep to a draft curling under your door and making the curtains breathe. The house has lungs, so do you. The wind visits, counts to 4 with you, in 2, 3, 4, out 2, 3, 4, and leaves you at the edge of a dream where the path is never lost because the air itself knows the way that never slept. Soos tells this one with his elbows on the counter and a smile that fits like a favorite hoodie. He says there's an arcade in town that naps all day and stretches all night, not loud, not blinking like fireworks. An after-hours hum that sounds like soda bubbles resting after a laugh. It lives behind a door that says closed in letters that look serious until you tilt your head and they look like they're winking. He found it one summer when the heat felt like a thick sweater you forgot to take off. He had keys to everything and used them only to make rooms feel safe. The arcade was dark except for a strip of glow under each cabinet, like the machines were wearing slippers with lights in the soles. He meant to check the breaker. He stayed because the air had that cool laundry smell, and somewhere a token rolled and stopped like a polite knock. Games by day are competitions, quarters for bragging rights, pixels that shout and keep score. Games by night become tutors. Their attract screens slow down. High scores drift like leaves in a lazy river. One cabinet, whose joystick leaned a little to the left, straightened itself, as if the night gave it the time to remember what upright felt like. Soos touched the glass of a pinball machine, and the bumpers blinked once, not to say play, but to say, hey. There's a racer whose track becomes a country road after midnight. No cars, no rivals, just white lines passing under tires like stitches sewing the day shut. If you press the gas, the engine purrs at a volume you could fall asleep to. The bushes on the side of the track are rounded and generous. They do not hide surprises. A billboard passes that reads nice. Not nice try, just nice. There's a platformer whose ladders lengthen and meet, making staircases that picnic up into the sky. The jump button turns into a bounce, and if you miss, a cloud lifts you to the safe spot with a little boop that says, "We got you." Enemies yawn and take union breaks. Coins rotate slowly, waiting for you to collect them when you're ready. If you don't, they don't mind. They like the view. Claw machines learn patience. The claws soften their grip to hold without pinching. When no one's there, the toys rotate their best faces to the glass anyway, practicing encouragement. One night, Soos saw a stuffed lobster nudge a rubber duck toward the center with a cloth fin. Both looked pleased with the plan. He cheered quietly, and the machine printed a ticket that read, "Good job," for no reason other than to agree. Soos sat on a stool, tokens in a cup he didn't shake. He listened to the power supply's contented whisper. He thought about how games teach you to try again without making the trying feel like failing. He thought about the way continue flashes, like a heartbeat, and how many times in real life you don't get a countdown or a free man, and how wonderful it is when you do. When a friend slides a token across the bar of your bad day and says, "On me." Once he put a token in. The machine blinked slow. The screen filled with instructions he already knew. Start when you feel like starting. Pause whenever. Save your progress by breathing. He drove a little digital car under a pixel moon that followed him without needing to be chased. He didn't set a record. He set a rhythm. Kids hear this and ask if they can go. He shrugs and says the door opens for gentle feet and quiet pockets, usually after you've done your chores and told the truth. He doesn't give directions. He does give everyone a ticket he keeps in a jar, printed years ago, the night the machine said, "Good job." He writes a name on each and says, "Redeem for one free try at anything." The jar never empties. Tickets appear after rain, after birthdays, after afternoons when someone helps without a reason. By morning, the arcade is ordinary again, bright, buzzy, a symphony of coins and cheers. Soos wipes fingerprints off the glass that no one left and whistles between his teeth a tune that means, "You got this." He fixes a button, tightens a bolt, smooths a cord with the tenderness of someone who knows machines are just shy people who communicate in beeps. When you dream that night, you find yourself on a level with no enemies and a soundtrack that sounds like the inside of a seashell. The timer is a line of dots that never gets shorter. The word "continue" doesn't flash because there is nowhere to fall from. You pick up a coin and it becomes warm and light, and then it becomes a morning where everything that dinged in your head yesterday now pings more softly, and you can press start or you can just stand there and know the game will wait, happy to be played whenever your hands are ready. And when you wake, you might find something in your pocket you didn't put there. A cardboard ticket that reads, "Good job" in cheerful letters. Maybe Soos slipped it there. Maybe the night arcade thinks well of you. Either way, breakfast tastes an inch sweeter, and the day's first task does not feel like a boss battle. It feels like a tutorial with lots of hearts and a big friendly arrow pointing to the button you already know how to press. Mabel believes sweaters are not clothes so much as portable weather. She will tell you a good sweater can make a cold day warmer, a lonely day louder, and a dark room remember where the light switch is. One afternoon that began with ordinary clouds and ended with a surprise sun shower, she knitted something the town still talks about in a low, smiling way. The sweater that caught the piece of rainbow and kept it. It started with color left behind on the world. Rain passed, sunlight leaned through, and the valley grew its sudden bridge of red to violet. After, there was a faint glow on everything, like the air had learned how to blush. Drops hung from the fence line, and each was a little prism, quietly practicing the whole spectrum. Mabel walked through it with her palms open, collecting not water exactly, but the permission to be bright. Back at the shack, she set out her yarns. They were already a parade. Cherry, tangerine, sunflower, meadow, sky, blueberry, grape, cloud. She added one ball she had wound herself out of odd strands found in pockets and drawers, a mixed skein of every yesterday. She made cocoa and hummed something that had no words and didn't need them. The room hummed back. Needles clicked. The window took a deep breath and fogged a soft oval where she leaned to check the sky. The pattern arrived the way friendly birds do, without asking for the front door. Mabel didn't plan it. The stripes chose their own widths. Sometimes the red wanted to be bold as a flag. Sometimes the green wanted to be a whisper you discover when you step closer. She worked the collar loose enough for laughter, the sleeves long enough to cover hands when thinking, the hem with a scallop that looked like waves when you looked down. At the center, she left one line bare. Not empty. Waiting. She had, for reasons she couldn't give a speech about, saved room. When the sweater was nearly done, she went outside and held it in the last light. Rain had been kind. The drops on the pine needles still held tiny rainbows, patient as little teachers. Mabel lifted the sweater like a net, and something happened you could call science or magic or both. The blank line filled, not with thread, but with a soft band of color that didn't come from any yarn. It was as if the sky lent her one more stripe for the night. The glow wasn't bright. It was the light of a nightlight down a hallway, the light of a radio dial in a car while someone tells you a story, the light of a jar with two fireflies that are both polite. In darkness, the stripe was the color of all the colors, a kind of warm purpose. When you wore it, you didn't become a sign. You became a lamp. Mabel did not keep the sweater to herself. That is not how this town works. And that is not how Mabel works. She made rules that were only good suggestions. Anyone cold may borrow it. Anyone sad may borrow it longer. Return it with a story in the pocket. The pocket was deep and lined with flannel because kindness needs a comfortable seat. Wendy wore it on a night when the wind wrote poems only she could read. She came back with a pine cone smooth as a skipped stone and put it in the pocket with the note. For the sound it makes when you roll it in your palm. Soos wore it while fixing the squeak in the front step. He returned it with a ticket that said, "Good job," and a doodle of a wrench smiling. Dipper tried it on during a set of confusing star charts and later tucked in a page where the calculations went nowhere in a single penciled sentence that went everywhere. It's okay to not know. Stan wore it once, which surprised everyone and then no one. He came in from the cold, looked at the sweater like it owed him money, put it on without looking left or right, and poured himself coffee. No one mentioned it. The pocket came back with a single old coin that wasn't American money, the date rubbed away, the edges soft from a lot of being held. No note. He didn't need one. The coin weighed just enough to say what he meant. People swear the sweater knew how to be what each person needed. On Mabel, it was a celebration. On Wendy, it was a flag of independence that still waved hello. On Soos, it was a tool belt, but for feelings. On Dipper, it was a study buddy that didn't mind eraser crumbs. On Stan, it was a blanket folded exactly once. If you sat quietly in a room with it draped over the chair, you could hear threads telling each other the stories from the pocket. Sometimes Mabel patched the rainbow line. You cannot patch light, but you can remind the sweater what shape it is. She used clear thread and patience. She used warm hands and a little breath, as if blowing on cooling glass. The line always returned to its soft glow, the way dawn returns, even on the day you forgot to set an alarm. One afternoon, a little kid brought it back late, eyebrows worried together. "I spilled grape juice," they confessed, holding the sweater as if it might arrest them. Mabel looked. The stain was a purple moon near the hem. She smiled big enough to make room for the mistake. "Great," she said. "Now it's got a planet." She added 3 small embroidered stars around it and showed the kid how sometimes mess becomes a map. There were nights you could pick out the wear from the hill, walking home like a moving ember. The stripe did not broadcast. It included. Moths were respectful. The wind made sure the hem didn't dip in puddles. Dogs wagged as if meeting an old friend. A passing raccoon considered a life of reform and then decided at least to tip his hat. When the season turned and sweaters sat folded like calm cats on shelves, the rainbow one lay on top. People still borrowed it for mornings that needed courage or evenings that needed soft. The pocket grew a small archive. Notes, ticket stubs, a smooth shell, a button from a coat someone outgrew, a list titled "Things That Are Okay to Do Slowly." Mabel never emptied it. She said pockets are stomachs for memories. If you feed them steady, they keep you from getting hungry for the wrong things. If you dream about it, you do not dream a garment. You dream walking through your day with a stripe down your middle that says you are allowed to be bright without being loud, warm without being swallowed, seen without being looked at. You wake up and maybe you don't wear the sweater, but the feeling wears you, and breakfast looks a little more like a celebration you forgot you were invited to all along. On a shelf that should have held atlases, but held, for a long time, a stack of board games missing one piece each, Dipper found a rolled map bound with a ribbon that remembered being blue. The paper was thick and tender at the edges. It smelled like cedar and old rain. Across the top, written in a hand that liked good pens, were 3 words: "For nights that wander." It was a star chart, but not like the others in his binder or on the library's globe. This one did not freeze the sky. It suggested it. Constellations were sketched as dotted lines, with polite arrows like pathways at a museum you are free to ignore. In the margins, notes leaned into the page the way someone leans across a table to tell you the true part of a story. Dipper unrolled it on the kitchen table, and the map lay flat without fuss, as if happy to be looked at again. The first odd thing was that some of the stars were not printed. They were pinpricks, tiny holes made with something so delicate even the paper seemed to have enjoyed it. When he held the map up, the room's light came through. When he held the map up at night against the window, the valley's actual stars winked through the pinholes. The chart did not copy the sky. It introduced the sky to itself. He learned by touching. The map wanted fingers, not only eyes. If he traced the handle of the Big Dipper, the line warmed under his fingertip like a cup after tea. If he followed the curve of Cassiopeia, breath eased in his chest, like the first unbuttoning of a tight collar. There was a spiral near the corner labeled, "Not always there," in gentle script. When he traced it, the feeling was not of being pulled in, but of being welcomed. Some notes were practical. When the Milky Way looks like spilled flour, weather will be kind. Some were patient jokes. The Pleiades are clumped like peas. Your eyes are the spoon. Some were the kind of advice maps rarely give. If you can't find north, find still. Dipper carried it out to the back steps with a pencil he forgot to use. The night wore a thin sweater of clouds with holes where stars pushed through, like the heads of curious mice. He laid the chart on his knees and, for a while, compared. He stopped comparing when comparison felt like grading a friend. He let the 2 skies talk, one on paper and one for real, and listened the way you nod during a conversation you love but don't need to direct. The falling stars announced themselves shyly. A line of light that began nowhere, went somewhere, and became a felt memory faster than a word can find its coat. One, then none, then 2, like the way laughter comes when someone finally shakes the seriousness out of a room. Dipper marked nothing down. He learned something maps cannot say until you set them down. You can miss a meteor trying to record it, and still have seen it perfectly in the part of you that wasn't holding a pencil. He asked the chart a selfish question without speaking it. What about choices? The paper rustled once. A faint breeze turned a corner up and set it down again, as if the night had lifted a page to peep. At the bottom of the map, words he hadn't noticed before had appeared where white had been. Pick the path where you can see Orion's belt from a porch. He laughed because it was not advice you could put in a spreadsheet and because it was right anyway. The map had a companion feature not drawn but felt. If you stood and held it above your head with both hands, it was a roof. And because you were under a roof, you stood straighter without feeling brave about it. If you lay beneath it on the grass and let it settle over you like a sheet in a summer fort, the pinholes became a field of small, kind eyes. They did not watch. They kept you company. Mabel joined him with a blanket that had seen many sunsets and 3 picnics. She didn't ask what the map was for. She asked what the night was for. Listening, Dipper said, surprising himself with the size of his answer. Also falling star bingo. She cheered without getting louder than the crickets and whispered her own bingo rules. A star that falls like a comma, a star that falls like a dash. A star that cheats and goes behind a cloud. A star you only feel because you blinked right then, and your heart did a trick. They watched until necks asked politely for pillows. They counted not to hoard, but to notice the rhythm the sky offered. Threes, then nothing, then a single streak that wrote its short letter to the horizon and signed it with a fade. The map warmed their legs. The air wrote softness around their ears. Somewhere a fox carried on its fox business and paid them no mind, which is a wild animal's way of trusting you. In the morning, the chart looked like paper again. The pinpricks were only pinpricks. The notes went back to staying where they were. Dipper rolled it with care and tied the ribbon, which was not blue anymore, but still thought it was. He put it away, not on a shelf, but on a nail he hammered above the window, so it could see the sky it loved. On days that asked big things of him, he touched the ribbon on his way out the door and remembered a line on the map too faint to see in daylight. Your eyes are also telescopes. Point them kindly. On nights when decisions stared with their arms crossed, he spread the chart on the table, turned off the lamp, and let the pinholes bring the outside in until choice loosened and options felt less like doors and more like paths meeting friendly. If you dream about it, you dream a room where the ceiling has holes arranged like hope. You dream that falling stars never really fall. They bow out. You wake with the thought that a map can be a teacher of patience better than of distance, and that when you pick a direction, the sky shows up to keep you company, even if the only thing you can name is still. The box fit easily in two hands and liked being held. Its wood was dark with the kind of shine that comes from years of being polished by someone who prefers cloth to instructions. No latch, no hinges, only seams so close you felt them more than saw them, like a smile before the smile. The first time Soos set it on the counter felt honored. There was a note in tidy letters. Solve slowly. Below that, in a different hand that had danced through life with less practice and more joy. It hums. Mabel read both out loud with the ceremonial voice she reserves for important announcements and cake. Dipper brought a magnifying glass because that is his hello. Wendy leaned on the post, eyes amused, as if ready to be surprised but not owed it. They did not pick at it. They greeted it. Soos tapped the corner lightly, and the box answered with a chord you almost didn't hear. Like a teacup when you set it down on a saucer that knows about afternoons. Not a tune. A promise that something musical lived inside the wood, not to perform, but to accompany. The first mechanism revealed itself when Mabel traced a carved spiral with the pad of her finger while telling the box about her day. The spiral clicked at the end like a cat's foot on a stair, and a small panel slid the width of a postcard. Inside was a painted tile, a little triangle of sky with a bird too tiny to be anything but a suggestion. When Mabel placed the tile on the counter, the box hummed a note one step up from the first. Dipper found numbers burned faintly along an edge, not in order, not in a row, but scattered like campfire sparks. He liked them immediately. He found that if he pressed them from smallest to biggest, nothing happened. And if he pressed them from biggest to smallest, still nothing. And if he pressed them in the particular order that matched the dates of 3 constellations rising in June, the box sighed a chord as if someone had just found the missing harmony. A panel on the opposite side slid, confessing a second tile, a corner of a tree with a suggestion of wind. They took turns. That was the rule they decided without saying. Soos discovered a brass pin that needed to be pushed while the box was turned upside down and rotated exactly 1.5 times, a dance move that would have looked silly to someone not in on the music. The reward was a third tile, a strip of water with a suggestion of moon. Wendy, who respects wood and won't be hurried by it, noticed the grain on one side ran contrary to its brothers. She ran her palm across it, pressed her thumb where the knot had a dark eye, and the top shifted a whisper to the left. Tile 4, a hill at dusk with a suggestion of path. They didn't rush to assemble the picture. They let the tiles lean against the sugar jar while they listened to the box's hums line up into something that could, if you leaned on the counter and closed your eyes, be called a melody. It was built of single notes that went together because kindness is a kind of math. You could say C followed by E followed by G and be correct. You could also say welcome followed by there you are, followed by nice. The hard part arrived here and there, and then not at all. A slider that stuck. A panel that slid and revealed nothing because the thing they needed to notice was the way the wood had warmed under their hands, and the warmth traveled to a spot where no visible thing existed. Puzzles that sing do not reward cleverness as fast as they reward gentleness. Invisible ink joined the party. Dipper breathed on a smooth side, and words appeared in a language the town uses for lullabies. If you do not know, rest. They rested. The box did not punish them for it. It hummed a long, low note that felt like a long, low couch. They found the next step not by thinking harder, but by standing up for stretch, and then seeing a seam in new light. When all 8 tiles lay side by side, the picture was not a picture so much as suggestions arriving at the same time. A sky with a bird, a tree with wind, a hill with a path, water with moon. If you squinted, it was the valley. If you relaxed your eyes, it was any place that knows how to hold a night. Soos arranged them, lifted his hands, and the box sang. Not loud, not a song with a chorus, but a tune made of all its earlier hums, stacked into a thing you could carry in your chest like a coin. They listened. It lasted the length of 3 breaths. When it finished, it left a silence that felt finished, too, like the way a kitchen sounds after dishes are done and the towel hangs content on the oven door. The box settled. A final panel opened, and inside was not treasure, unless you count a card with 1 sentence as treasure, which you should. It read, "Keep the melody, let go of the box." They did. They returned the tiles to their pockets and then, one by one, slid them back into their slots. They pressed seams until wood met wood, the way old friends meet at a bus stop and stand shoulder to shoulder without needing to catch up. Soos wiped the top with the corner of his shirt. Mabel kissed it the way you kiss air near someone's cheek. Dipper rolled his pencil between fingers and did not reach for his magnifying glass. Wendy said, "Thanks." Later they realized the puzzle had shifted something in the room. The radio tuned easier. The floorboard by the sink squeaked in a key that matched the refrigerator's hum. The ceiling fan learned not to complain. If you hummed the box's melody under your breath while sweeping, dust moved in helpful spirals. If you hummed it while walking home, streetlights seemed to remember to warm their halos an extra notch. If you hummed it to a baby who could not sleep, the baby decided to try. Night found the tune and put it where it puts good things, in the part of your mind that turns grinding into stirring. In dreams, locks did not clack. They sighed. Codes did not taunt. They waited. You did not solve. You accompanied. You woke with the idea that puzzles, like people, sometimes want to be understood more than they want to be finished. And the first thing you touched that morning, mug, doorknob, pencil, answered with a tiny hum you might have imagined, and that counts too. Storms have moods. This one arrived without thunder trophies or bragging lightning. It came like a polite knock from a big hand. Rain began steady the way good advice begins, and the trees bowed a little, as if greeting someone they hadn't seen since last autumn. The town adjusted its shoulders. Lights flicked on in kitchens. Porch rugs got pulled inside. Somewhere a dog said, "Right, okay," and settled under a table. Then the power blinked once, twice, and took a nap. The Mystery Shack, despite its name, knows how to be obvious when it has to. Its sign went dark and then remembered it could glow without help. Not neon exactly, not candles, a warm between light, like the low setting on a friendship. Windows breathed a honey color from inside. The front step sighed and dried itself. The bell over the door chimed without being touched, which is one of the shack's oldest habits when it wants to be a lighthouse. People arrived without being called. That is how lighthouses work. Wendy came with a bag of batteries she would end up not needing and a smirk for the sky. Soos showed with an armload of extension cords and the stance of a man who will never let a night be uncomfortable if he can help it. Mabel brought blankets patterned with shapes that looked like, if a confetti factory learned to be cozy. Dipper had a flashlight, a backup flashlight, and a notebook that forgave him for not writing in it much tonight. Stan muttered about generators and went to check the basement, which is where he keeps his complaints, so they don't get rain on him. He came up with a box of candles shaped like fruit and a face that said, "Fine, we can make this nice." He set the candles around without lighting them because the shack already glowed and because a man should know when to let a building show off. People came in wet at the edges and dried just standing near the walls. That is when they noticed artifacts and oddities, usually intent on being exhibits, had softened. The shrunken head looked less interested in impressing and more interested in being at a party where it didn't have to talk. The jar of something pickled glowed the exact amount that makes you feel safe in a kitchen. The velvet ropes unroped themselves and coiled politely in corners as if to say, "This is a living room tonight." The jukebox, which has seen more quarters than some parking meters, hummed a steady chord, not a song. A tone that made conversation comfortable at a whisper. Someone started a pot of stew on a hot plate that should not have worked, and did because the shack had decided to feed people. Bread appeared not from nowhere, but from a paper bag that had been waiting to be remembered. Butter softened, like it had been practicing all afternoon for this entrance. The kids made a camp on the floor with blankets pitched over chairs, tunnels connecting to tunnels, small lamps inside, plush ambassadors at the doors. Every fort had a password that changed as soon as an adult guessed it, and sometimes as soon as a friend arrived, because sometimes the right password is just the name of the person you want to see. Laughter stayed under the blankets mostly, but some escaped and sparkled in the hallways. Someone told a story about the year the river reversed. Someone told the one about the clock and 13. Nobody told the scary versions of anything. The shack enforces that rule by changing the subject gently when voices try to put edges on the night. It does it by offering a board game at just the right moment, by making the couch deeper when someone sits down to say something heavy and decides to simply sit. A leak began over the back door. Before a bucket could be found, the drip learned to choose the empty moments between sentences. Plink when someone smiled. Plink when someone lifted a spoon, not when someone spoke. Dipper noticed and nodded at the ceiling. The ceiling did nothing in particular, which is how you say you're welcome when you're a building. There was a point when the storm remembered thunder and clapped once like a big uncle, and then went back to telling long stories in the gutters. The shack's glow warmed in response, and a framed photo on the wall, one with more faces than names, brightened so the eyes caught a little light and looked more awake than they do in daylight. If you stood near it, you could feel a crowd belong to you. Mabel moved through the room like a bee that doesn't sting, collecting mugs, delivering blankets, tucking stray corners under tired toes. She placed the rainbow sweater over the back of a chair that had decided to host 3 people at once and not complain. The stripe acknowledged the shack's glow with a respectful bow. 2 lights, both the same kind. Soos found that the arcade cabinet in the corner, sensibly asleep, still offered a soft reflection in its dark screen. The room behind you, but calmer. He told Zach, who had lost a tooth on Tuesday and been brave about it, to look. He saw himself less worried about the hole and more excited about the new, which is a console's way of practicing dentistry. Wendy stood in the doorway now and then, letting the rain cold her knuckles, then returned to the warmth, the way you sip water between sweet things. Stan pretended not to enjoy any of it as much as he did, but the corners of his frown kept failing at their job, and when he refilled someone's bowl, he did it like a bartender who knows the whole neighborhood is his tab tonight. Electricity returned the way cats return, without apology. Lights clicked on in rooms that had been lit anyway. The shack dimmed its glow to make room for the ordinary bulbs to feel helpful. The radio found its station. The fridge kicked in with a sound like a content yawn. Nobody cheered because nothing had been missing. People stayed a while longer than they needed to because sometimes you leave as soon as you can and sometimes you do not. When the door opened to let the last damp boots out, the bell rang the exact note the puzzle box had taught it, which is impossible and fine. The sign outside shone its proper shine. The storm went off to visit hills that liked to eavesdrop. The road shone black and friendly. The shack settled back into its shapes, artifacts returning to their poses, velvet ropes remembering they like a line. Later, if you walked past, you'd swear the building still glowed a little in its sleep, the way a person does when they've done right by the people they love and their dreams are tidy because their day was. In your own bed, you might see the shack when you close your eyes. Not the tricks, not the tours, just the room with too many chairs and enough cups. The walls that make a circle the rain cannot cross. The small ways a place can say you belong without using a single word. You turn, the pillow makes the soft sound of a cloud agreeing, and the night carries you the short distance to morning. Triangles are decisive shapes. They point, they balance, they make roofs and mountains and slices of pie. In Gravity Falls, there is a triangle that once tried to be the whole sky. Tonight, it is smaller. It is a little ember in the dark, an eye blinking like a firefly that knows geometry. Bill shows up the way a pun shows up, sideways, a little pleased with itself. But in this telling, he is not a storm. He is a maze with soft walls. The first door appears in the air above a stump. It swings open without hinges, revealing a hallway made of card catalog drawers. Each label reads something gentle. Lost but fine. Questions that don't need answers. Socks without their partners. Still good. The drawers are shut. They will stay shut. The hallway is only for walking. Mabel steps through, and the floor becomes a trampoline that does not bounce unless you laugh. She laughs, and it yields, then holds, then lifts her 1 inch higher than worry. Dipper follows, measuring not distances but feelings, learning the map by the temperature of the air, warm at choices that have many correct answers, cool at riddles that fold into naps. Bill flickers at the edge of sight, a chalk drawing that keeps being redrawn. He says things in a voice that used to be a horn and now is a flute. Up, down, neither, both. Try forward, kid. He points with a corner, which is how triangles gesture when they forgot to bring hands. His eye doesn't leer. It winks like a joke isn't a secret. It's a bridge. Stairs go sideways and teach you to tilt your head. Doors open to rooms already emptied of fear. In one, a parade of shadow animals marches by. Wolf, bear, cat, rabbit, each carrying a lantern that lights their own face softly, so you can stand there and not be startled by your own outline. In another, chalkboards write, "It's okay" in 100 scripts, then erase themselves to make room for the next person who needs the board. There are puzzles, but they are the tea time sort. A table with 4 cups and only 3 saucers. The fourth is the table itself, a lock with a keyhole in the shape of a sigh. You open it by exhaling. A jigsaw with one missing piece labeled "Talk to Someone," and you finish it by sitting down beside the box and doing that for 5 minutes. Each solution earns a soft ding, the same noise a toaster makes when toast is ready, and you didn't watch it the whole time. Bill hovers near a room of mirrors that do not distort. They simply choose what to show. One mirror reflects you resting. One shows you after you drank water. One shows your face when you remember a joke 2 days later, and finally laugh alone in the kitchen. If you ask which is the real one, Bill spins slowly like a coin and says, "Yes." The maze loops gently back toward itself. Paths cross in ways that don't trap you. They introduce you to your own good footwork. Mabel ties yarn to a banister just for tradition and finds that it leads her not out, but to a little garden tucked inside the maze. Tomatoes on trellises, basil thinking big, a watering can that fills itself when you say please. "Nice," she tells Bill. And the triangle tips as if it has been complimented at a party and doesn't quite know where to put its hands it doesn't have. Dipper reaches a room with constellations pinned to the ceiling, with thumbtacks made of kind intentions. He recognizes the map he hung in his room and the other map, the one that lives behind his eyes. He holds both in his head at the same time, and nothing breaks. Bill's eye crinkles at the corner, which is a surprising thing for an eye to do. "See? You can keep 2 truths in the same pocket if you fold them right." At the center, there is no center. There is a bench. It has a view of everything you have already walked. You sit, and your steps sit with you. You learn that mazes aren't only about escaping. They can be about seeing how many ways a place can be kind. Bill floats, smaller now, the size of a keychain charm. "Deal?" he says, and offers none. "The deal is this. The maze will let you out when you stop needing to be clever and start letting your feet do what feet do best. Go home." They walk out through a door that is a curtain that is a breeze. The stump is still a stump. The triangle ember fades to a moth. Bill is gone in the way chalk is gone after rain. The paths remain, not under the shoes, but in their steps, which have learned a new softness. If you dream of him tonight, he is a lamp in a hallway of gentle riddles, and when you pass, he tips his hat that he never had and says, without menace, "Nice work, kid." An ending once tried to arrive all at once. It came with colors that didn't have names yet, and with edges that bent like spoons in hot tea. Streets lifted an inch off their foundations to stretch their backs. Laws of physics loosened their ties, usually this would scare a town. Gravity Falls decided to take a breath first. Shadows, which often worry people, behaved. They sat quietly beside their owners, slightly out of alignment, like friends scooting over on a bench to make room for a story. The sky unfolded into extra panels like a map with hidden flaps, and on each flap was a calmer version of the sky beneath it, as if the day had set up blankets to soften its own fall. Time untied itself and flowed like ribbon. The clock tower, which had learned the art of forgetting without panic, rang a long note that sounded like a door held open and a hand waving you through. The bell did not count. It accompanied. Buildings learned to sway. The diner bent a little to look into its own windows and, pleased, straightened. The hardware store let its door become a rectangle of brighter color, as if someone adjusted the saturation slider on morning. The library's green lamp breathed deeper and cast circles that could have been portals if portals had been needed. They were not. Out in the square, people held onto what mattered. Hands, memories, the names of their favorite pie slices. Mabel wrapped the rainbow sweater around someone who had left their courage on a chair at home. The stripe warmed as if it had been waiting for this exact shoulder. Dipper traced the path on the map of falling stars with his index finger and found that the pinholes matched new lights in the sky. Oh, constellations shifting into arrangements that spelled words like stay and together, if you didn't insist on reading them like homework. Stan did not admit concern. He admitted more stew to more bowls, the kind of ladling that makes forks unnecessary. Soos moved through the room with his after-hours arcade rhythm, turning falling things into floating things with a touch, fixing panic by tightening it like a loose bolt, and then loosening it like a tight one. Wendy stood where the wind could find her, and in finding her, remember how to behave. Bill's shape ghosted across the sky, less sharp than the rumors, a piece of chalk held by an uncertain teacher. He tried to boom. The town hummed instead. The humming was the puzzle box melody layered with the jukebox steady chord, layered with the fan in the shack, layered with stew, bubbling, layered with the collective breath of a place that had practiced calm as a craft. The boom had nowhere to land. It set itself down gently and became part of the hum. Weirdness arrived like guests who had driven too far without stopping. It set its luggage down. It needed water. The town poured it. In another version of this story, there are teeth and teeth and teeth. In this one, there are napkins and someone remembering to turn off the porch light early so the sky can feel special, and a raccoon tipping his hat twice as if saying, "We can all be civilized on a Tuesday." The edges of things softened. Corners put on little felt hats. Signs spun once, and Dizzy laughed. The lake rose enough to kiss the dock, and then Shy retreated. The river, which had reversed once to learn something about itself, stayed put, anchoring the valley like a kind hand at the small of the town's back. The wind threaded through everything, stitching sky flaps to roof lines, tying together a quilt big enough for everybody and their worries. Neighbors tied ribbons from porch to porch, across alleys, around lampposts, to turn streets into gentle nets, not to catch, to hold. Children ran under them, and the ribbons dipped to pat their hair. The gnomes showed up with pie and formality. "We have done feasts," their elder declared. "We can do endings." He set a blueberry on a windowsill like a period after a good sentence. A door somewhere clicked contentedly. When the bright folded back into ordinary, it did not slam. It tucked itself in. Colors climbed back into their names. Physics rebuttoned its shirts. The clock rang the 13th note only in the memory of those who had needed it. The town blinked as a person blinks when a dream ends without a chase. People straighten pictures because straightening pictures is a way to be useful when there is nothing left to fix. Weirdmageddon, in this version, was a rehearsal for being calm together. It taught the town to harmonize, and it taught Bill that some shapes only feel sharp until you draw them with a kinder pencil. It taught the sky to trust roofs and the roofs to trust the hands that built them. If you dream of it now, you dream a field trip to a museum of bright nonsense where the guide reminds the group, "Inside voices, please." And everyone nods and still has a great time. Endings have two sounds, the zipper closing and the laugh that happens after the zipper, when someone remembers the one thing still on the bed. The last night before the twins leave becomes a fort. Chairs are recruited. Blankets volunteer. Lamps crouch under quilts and turn into small suns. Pillows make a border that keeps out everything except friends and snacks. Mabel names each tunnel like streets in a nice neighborhood. Glitter Row, Marshmallow Avenue, Quiet Lane. Dipper draws a map of the fort because even forts like to know who they are on paper. Soos brings a string of lights that used to frame a pinball machine and now frame a doorway. Wendy appears with the easy grace of someone who does not knock because she built part of this place with her hands years ago. She knows where the squeak is and steps around it. Stan does perimeter checks that are mostly an excuse to tuck a corner and adjust a lamp and leave a plate of cookies bigger than he intended, and insult the cookies for being delicious before anyone else can. Ford stops by the edge of the fort like a scientist at the boundary of a new ecosystem, marveling at how blankets double as ecosystems when correctly draped. He offers a story about a night on the ocean when the stars were so thick you could lose track of gravity, and then edits himself for bedtime, trading peril for wonder. They tell stories, not the sharp ones, the soft ones that add up to a summer you can carry. The day the river walked backwards, the turtle that escorted a lantern, the clock forgetting noon with dignity, the puzzle that sang in a key kitchen's door. They pass around the rainbow sweater not to wear all at once, that is too warm, but to let each person touch the stripe and feel it answer. The pocket becomes a guest book. Notes go in. 3 words, a doodle of a hat, the number 13, a heart drawn so lightly you can only see it if you tilt the paper toward the lamp. Gifts arrive that are not loud. Wendy gives Mabel a ribbon cut from a wind-kissed branch, so you can tie the air when it gets messy. Soos gives Dipper a good job ticket with the word anything written in the spot for the prize. Stan hands them a coin too worn to spend and too perfect not to keep. He says, "Don't lose this," and means, "Take me with you." Ford slides over a little compass that sometimes points to true north and sometimes points to rest, which is useful more often. They eat marshmallows that have learned through practice to soften without sticking. The stew from the last chapter, which should not still be warm, is someone has the good sense to slice apples and pass the salt shaker because salt on apple is a small genius that feels like a secret even when it isn't. Dipper wanders out to the steps, and the map of falling stars catches his glance as if it had raised a hand in class. Mabel follows, dragging a blanket like a comet tail. They look up and find a sky not trying to impress them. It doesn't need to. They've been impressed enough. It offers, instead, one slow meteor that writes OK across the dark, and then signs it with a friendly fade. Goodbyes are braided, not cut. Wendy's is a high five that lands like a promise. Soos's is a hug that counts as 2. Stan's is a grunt that means keep your socks dry and also everything else. Ford's is a note tucked in a book that says, "For nights that wander," in a hand that has finally learned to choose pens with good ink. They fall asleep in a tangle that would look chaotic to someone who doesn't understand how forts teach order. The lights dim to the puzzle box key. The wind signs the guest book by lifting the blanket slightly and setting it down fuller. The shack listens and glows an inch, the way porches glow when families are doing something right inside. Morning is a zipper sound and laughter. The fort collapses into laundry and legend. The map rolls. The sweater folds. The tickets go in a pocket. The coin goes in another, and there it makes every step feel like a story with a weight you enjoy. There are tears, but they behave. Tears can behave when you explain the plan to them. We keep the good, we share the rest. We meet again when the wind points to here. Stan and Ford leave like 2 lanterns taking their light on a walk. The boat is not large, but it knows the size of water. The dock releases them with a rubbery kiss. The lake watches them cross its coin and nods when the river takes over. Then the wider river that all rivers want to become. And then the place where rivers run out of names and become tide. The ocean greets them with the bigness of a ceiling you can't touch, even with a broom. It smells like every story that ends on a cliff, but then builds a staircase down the side. The waves wear white collars and bow as they reach the hull. The gulls say sentences that sound rude until you realize it's just their accent. The wind, multilingual, translates, "Welcome, left and right of the same spine." The brothers work in a rhythm no metronome would approve and no song could better. One ties, one checks, one steers, one stares. They swap without speaking, learning the choreography of a partnership that has been through the hard seasons and now stands in the good light. So, at night, the sea does the second twilight in a bigger room. Stars lean closer because there is less to bump into. The map in Dipper's window glows a little at the same time, as if paper can smell salt from far away. Ford charts and uncharts. Stan takes the wheel and pretends not to enjoy the way it feels like the right size of decision in his palms. They collect small things, a bottle with a note that simply reads, "Keep going." A shell that fits in the bowl of a thumb like it was always a button waiting for this very hand. A fish that stares at them unimpressed, then swims on, which is the ocean's way of saying, "You're fine." They return small things, a coin flicked into a wave that flips it and sends it back. It lands on the deck, tails, which in this case means home. Messages leave and return. A jar with a cedar sprig, the one from the canoe on the backward river, floats by one morning and nudges the hull. Inside is a folded paper. They open and find a drawing of a sweater with a stripe and the single word, "Still." Stan looks up at the horizon to hide his face from no one. Ford smiles with the exact number of teeth required by joy. They meet fog that behaves, storms that introduce themselves, calms that teach patience in a new dialect. The compass points sometimes at north, sometimes at the thought that feels most like north. They follow both and neither, and arrive exactly where you are supposed to arrive when the trip is made of company more than coordinates. When they sleep, the boat sleeps too, all ropes slackening a syllable, the mast exhaling. Waves tap the hull the way you tap a friend's shoulder to say, "I'm here," and not because you need anything. The moon does its work and goes off shift. The sun clocks in and, professional, warms wood before faces. Back in Gravity Falls, the lake practices ocean in miniature. Lanterns drift a little farther. The wind tries on a salt note. Kids throw pebbles with a sailor's confidence and watch them sink with a scientist's calm. The town is landlocked and knows it, but it also knows that being connected is not only about water, it's about the ribbon between places that never tangles if you don't yank it. Stan and Ford send postcards with pictures of horizons and write on the back about soup and stars and a bird that landed on the boom and refused to leave until it had heard the end of a story. The cards arrive late and exactly when needed. They go on the fridge under a magnet shaped like a pie. Every time someone opens the door, the postcards move an inch, as if stretching. If you dream the ocean tonight, it is not large enough to drown you. It is large enough to hold everything you are done carrying. You hand it the heavy parts, it gives you back a shell, a coin's weight, a sentence as small as a lantern. Keep going. You wake with a salt on your lip that might be memory and might be a tear, and you don't need to solve the chemistry of it. You just drink water and carry on. Night returns like a friend who never makes you meet them anywhere loud. The campfire of stars relights itself. Pines draw those careful dark lines against the sky's deep blue. The town makes its soft household noises, dishwater sighs, book pages closing, the small applause of a light switch. The library's green lamp keeps its island of honey for late readers. The clock remembers its numbers and also its 13th note in case someone needs a borrowed hour. The river keeps direction with confidence learned from reversing. The lake holds still long enough to reflect back to you what you brought to it. Windows go warm, then softer, then out. The mystery shack lets its glow dim to a memory and is proud without boasting. The puzzle box hum settles into the floorboards. If you stand barefoot, you can hear a tune in your bones that makes sleep arrive on time without being called. The rainbow sweater lies folded on a chair, the stripe faint as a heartbeat at rest. The arcade that never slept sleeps, but its tickets reproduce like good ideas, one more by the sugar, one tucked in a pocket you forgot your coat had. The wind does last rounds, checking latches lightly, breathing curtains once, tracing the ridge line with a fingertip, as if underlying the sentence the day wrote. It whispers through Wendy's path and ties a bow in Mabel's ribbon, and flips Dipper's page just enough to save his place. It carries a keep going from the ocean, and a still from the sweater, and a nice from the arcade, and drops them like bookmarks in the valley's open book. If there were codes tonight, they were the kind that translate into lullabies. If there were riddles, they solved themselves by being held instead of handled. If there were shapes in the dark, they tipped their hats and became furniture, which is what shapes long to become when we give them names without teeth. You are here, at the edge of Gravity Falls, where roads turn into paths and paths turn into moss. The little clearing waits beside the slow creek. The stone circle holds heat the way a memory holds light. The sky is a bowl, and the rim is the Milky Way. This hour has a name the town invented for itself, Second Twilight, and it fits like a sweater with sleeves long enough to cover your hands while you think gentle thoughts. We have wandered, and nothing chased us. We have wondered, and nothing demanded answers. We have visited beginnings and ended by braiding, not cutting. We have watched the river learn, the clock remember, the lanterns return, the maze be kind, the weird become a rehearsal for calm, the fort teach closeness, the ocean accept offerings and give back small, bright things. Close the journal. The page will keep your place. The forest makes the house sounds again. Creaks that mean rest. Leaves that mean shh. The porch steps settle. The last window goes from warm to dark to still. The bell above the door rings once in a key you now know by heart, and then keeps the rest of the night for itself. Sleep well beneath the pines.